Hey there, folks. Ryan Kingsline here. Welcome to day 10 of the 12 Days of Realism. Today we're going to talk, hopefully this is going to be really brief, really short, but incredibly impactful. And I'm doing it that way because I want you to be focused on this and the impact of it. And then I want you to sit back and relax and be like, oh my God, one small step for my model, or for me, one giant step for my model. Because this is incredibly impactful. You don't even really notice it. I mean, we're looking at it right now. You're looking at what we're going to talk about, and it's peach fuzz and stubble. And I'm going to remove them right now from this model. Let's take this down a touch. Let's remove first the stubble. Okay, that goes, and you're like, oh, yeah, he's clean shave. Now the peach fuzz goes, and the model just loses something. You almost can't even put a finger on it. I'm not quite sure what's missing, but something is missing. And you especially see it, which is really kind of the key, you especially see it when the form rotates around. So if your eye was located over here, you're like, well, I didn't see anything, Ryan. Yeah, but look at the edges down here, right? Look at the edges over here. Look at the edges. Look all over the place and all these different edges as I turn this off. Okay, now it's off. It fades off, so you got to be mindful of it. It fades off, but look, super clean, super clean, super clean, super clean, super clean. We're super clean. Put that back on, and it's like, oh, yeah, I see it. There's a little something funky on the edges. And you can see it all over, right? Because the whole deal with this is it even gets down here. You get it everywhere. When you do this first one, peach fuzz, it goes everywhere. That's the goal. All right, and we do this inside of ZBrush using Fibermesh. And I'm going to show you the process, right? If we come in here, just so you get a sense of it, here is, if I remember right, oh, let's make sure that's on. That's roughly the Fibermesh. I think there was some changes in the model, so it changed a little bit in the back end. But that's the Fibermesh for the most part. That's what we're going to go through and we're going to create. I think that was an early version of stubble, another stubble, another stubble, another, and then, oh, yeah, look at that. I think this was the final peach fuzz with a couple of modifications because the shape changed. Got to thicken it. Anyways, this is going to be fun, all right? So the way this works, and I don't know if you're new to ZBrush or any of that stuff, and ZBrush really is the tool for this, in my view. I mean, I'm sure there's other tools that are out there, but if you're looking to create a lot of hair all over the place, this is a fantastic, super simple tool to use. But it can be confusing, because if you're looking over here at Fibermesh, you know, you open up the Fibermesh and you're like, well, what the hell? Nothing's happening. Okay, so step number one, you turn preview on. That's step number one, okay? Then the step number two, you got to go through, there's some settings, and I'm going to walk you through all of that because, you know, I'm a pro. I used to work at Pixelogic. I helped develop it. The first thing to know, and it might be the case here, view mask. Yeah, I had view mask hidden. It shows either where the mask is or it shows everywhere. So let's do that again. I'm going to turn preview on, and there you go. Now, because, you know, we're doing this as peach fuzz, I don't really need the back of the head. Okay, there's several places I don't actually need it or that it can become problematic. So what I'm going to do right now might be a little counterintuitive, but I'm going to mask out these areas where I don't want it. And then we'll just invert the mask, and we don't need it in here. It's nice. It's going to be nice to have it there. We don't need it inside his ears. I mean, you know, at a certain age, sure. I'm of that certain age. It's like, what's that in my ear? That's over 40, Ryan. All right, there we go. Get a little bit of this. Why would you put it back here when you have hair here, right? Not that we're getting into hair here in the 12 Days of Realism. I don't want to delude you into, you know, thinking that it's all that easy. There's a lot that's involved in all of this stuff. And again, my goal in the 12 Days of Realism is to get you a win. I just want you to have a win of all of this. Okay, and just wet your beak in what's possible if you open up and you start to shift from being a digital sculptor into this brand new world of all this of realism. Just taking the next step. It's kind of been my journey over the last year or so. Let's go into masking. I'm going to blur the mask. Okay, pretty crap. So I'm going to lower my subdiv, blur, increase my subdiv. You know, it's just easier that way because the mask is associated with your polygons. Okay, so we can come into masking. We can turn the view mask off, come back into our Fibermesh and hit preview. All right, now this is looking pretty good by default because I kind of set it up. You know, like it's just part of the presets. So yours is not going to be anywhere near this ideal because it's not set up for this, right? And I've gone through and I've set several things. So when you're looking over here, I want to give you a sense of the things that are relatively important. Okay, and I want to give you first, of course, you know me, I want the big strokes. Big strokes. First big stroke for you to look at is max fiber. All right, the rest of that stuff you can leave kind of at its default, but we're going to set max fiber. You're going to set length. Okay, coverage is also relatively important, and then gravity. Now, gravity is a little less important here because of the size of these things. It's not we're not dealing with a ton, but those are the 4 really important parameters for me to get right off the beginning. The other thing to be mindful of, if we were to say the 5th, is going to be profiles and segments. Now, what profiles means is that this is Fibermesh. The word mesh is relevant in there. It means that it's actually geometry. It's not really what we call full geometry. It's what we call BPR geometry until we convert it. When it's here in this Fibermesh, it's what Pixelogic calls BPR, which is kind of like this special kind of fake geometry. But you can convert it. It's just fake geometry because they do certain things in the rendering. They have certain features built into it with the groom brushes and things like that. So in this case, profiles means if you're looking at a square, that would be a profile of 4. So 3 is a triangle. And then if you were to come in here and go something like that, what is that, 5? You know, so we're starting to veer towards the triangle and circle. You start to increase your profiles. We don't really need to do that. And as you increase your profiles, you got to remember, just going from a 3 to a 4, that increases your polygon count everywhere. Every single one of these gets 1 extra face. And it's not just 1 extra face because this other line that's down here, segments, is relatively important. So if I've got 3, it looks like that, right? And then this is 3D. So that's not the wisest. Let's do this way so you can see it. We'll have it disappearing down into space. Okay, we'll let it go. Okay, 3 segments would be 1, 2. So if you were to then now suddenly turn this into, something that has, come on, Ryan, you can do this. Something that has 4 sides. Each one of these, 1, 2, 3, it's now actually 3 extra, and then you multiply it by all the hair strands that you have in here, and suddenly you're dealing with thousands being added to the conversation. And if you're dealing with longer hair, your problem's augmented because your segments is definitely not 3. It's significantly higher, right? We want 3, and we want 3 for a specific reason. It's because if you think about a curve isn't that. That's a bend. A curve is that. That's 3 segments. So for us to get some decent kind of quality, because remember, peach fuzz is something you see at the edge, right? You see over here? So in order for us to get some decent quality out of that, we need at least 3. And we don't need too much more than that. 3 does it. So those are the key components in here. And the way that you think about max fibers is, number 1, just hover over that, right? And look at this this broad spectrum conversation here. Okay, what is it? How does this feature work? Anytime you hover over something, you press Control, you get these beautiful pop-ups in there. I remember actually writing these when I worked at Pixelogic. I wrote a few of these myself, although Ofer, he's just a madman. He just, he wrote most of them himself, and he'd been writing them from go. So max fibers, what it tells you here is that number is per 1,000. It says the values are in thousands of fibers. So what this means is if I've got this set to 60, that means everywhere within this masked area, I'm going to have 60,000 pieces of 60,000 fibers created within the area that I've chosen. Okay, if I choose a smaller area, it still fits 60,000 in that area. But I've chosen a bit of a larger area. So, and this isn't, exact. ZBrush, it's not exact. There's these variant factors over here. There's also by mask, there's by area. And so there's a couple of things affecting it and helping you understand it. So we're going to set this somewhere within tolerances of the machines, so to speak. So 60,000 individual strands. We could set this at 80, see what that does. It's kind of nice. But either one of those settings is okay as it is right now. The biggest thing that we got to deal with is, especially if we come in and we look at the sides, is the length and the thickness of this. Because it's just way too thick right now. So if I come in and I go to length, let's set our length to 8. That's kind of nice, but it's really hairy. And the way that you want to think about this is look at the side, look at reference, and how far out does Peach Fuzz go in somebody. Now, there are some things that we can do because the length in and of itself is not the only deciding factor. Because if you come down here into gravity, my gravity is pretty light. I can set it to 0, and it does a few weird things there. But, you set it to 0, comes straight out. If you set your gravity higher and higher, then it's going to drop down more and more. All right? That's good. And then the secret weapon in Fibermesh is actually this guy right here. So if you want something that's really curly, you actually use that Nove slider. It's not Nove. What it is it's directional variation. It's like normal variation, I think is what Ofer was thinking. Watch what happens if I just increase that to 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. Now watch what happens when I increase the length to 18. That's how you get some crazy stuff going on. Okay, and that actually is freaking me out. So this is a very significant, and it can kind of modify a lot of these things. But for Peach Fuzz, it's relatively straightforward. I don't even imagine us going to a 0.1, although that's possible. 0.05, leave it as default. Set my gravity back to about a 0.3 because it's very light. It's not actually going to get affected a lot. The density at the edges, I can already tell, and it's more of a feel thing. Make sure you go in and you look. It's too much. And we can do 7 right there. Yeah, I'm okay with that. And then, I'm just looking around it just to see if anything else is troubling me. All right, the other thing is the thickness. Okay, now if we come into our coverage, and I'm going to set my coverage to 10, it gets thicker. Set my coverage to 20, to 50, coverage equals thickness. So I've given you the three big, huge factors here. There's the amount of fibers, which comes from max fibers. There's the length, which comes from length. And there's the width, which comes from, of course, not width or diameter, or it comes from coverage. So, okay, thank you. Fair enough. So let's come in and say, hey, this has a little slider in there. And it's like, well, what the heck does that do? Okay. Whenever these numbers don't make big differences, pass it up, right? Because you'll know if it's relevant. So I'm going to set this down to 5 and then set this back to 8. And at this point, you're experimenting. It's Peach Fuzz, not Stubble. But if you go too light, everything starts to go away. And like I said before, you can add transparency to this to really help make a difference in your work. okay? The rest of this stuff's not really relevant for us. There's revolve, there's twist, there's H tangents and clumps and all of that, but all of that stuff is designed for when you're dealing with larger pieces of it. So we've effectively covered, you know, the basis for what we want to do. I am going to come in here and let's go view mask, and I kind of want to add a little bit more here. And when you do that, it stops the whole process. So you just got to go back up to Fibermesh and you go preview again. There you go. Okay, let's get rid of that mask because it is, I'm not getting rid of it, sorry, I'm turning the visibility of it down. And I feel like that length could go a little more from a distance. No, that's like hairy land. All right, it's going to be, for me, a game between max fibers and length. All right, if I have a lot in there, I'm going to keep the length down a bit. But, you know, between that, we're going to get some result that's going to look okay. And then, of course, the most important thing is that you just get this done. So get it in and experiment with it. I'm just going to say, yeah, go ahead. Do that. I don't care. I come into the subtool. It's created a new subtool right here. This is my brand new Fibermesh right there. And I can just come over to the top of this and I can export this. So we'll come into, well, let's just call this delete. And yeah, we'll keep it in JCVD. But let's hold to our, let's call it mentorship. That was the thing that was working. Mentorship fuzz. Save it out. You're not done now because remember, you have a intermediary. You have a hub application that you are always plugging into. So we're going to go back into Maya. We have our model here, and hopefully it's the same model. If it's not, I'll show you a little trick to deal with that. But then we're going to come in and whoop, pause, stop, hold the show. There's a big problem we almost walked into. Huge problem, actually. Go back to ZBrush. Make sure you've got that peach fuzz selected, and this peach fuzz may have multiple groups. The edges of it may be grouped differently. There might be a whole bunch of stuff going on. Do yourself a favor and group visible. So you group all the fuzz under one poly group, and then you export that. Okay, and so then let's find our mentorship, fuzz, and save that out. Makes your life a million times easier. When you import into Maya, you can turn groups, and there's a bunch, but do yourself a favor, you know, just so that you're not accidentally importing it with the wrong settings, or maybe Max has something that's different, yada, yada, yada. Just in ZBrush, make it all one poly group and keep it safe. All right, so let's come in. We're going to import. You can do it. The import. I just selected it. OBJ, mentorship, fuzz. It's going to take its time, and there you go. Looks different here, yeah? Mostly what I'm looking for in this case, because I've been working with multiples, I'm just like, is it missing from anywhere? It's not missing from anywhere, so I'm okay. But here, look at this nose. It's like, I don't know. I'm not sold on this. Not sold at all. But so it goes. One more thing to do. You've got to, over here in the mesh menu, you've got to go down to transfer attributes. We're going to have to transfer the normals from the face to the hair. Now, I'm dyslexic as hell, so, you know, if somebody asks me left, right, what you do, and so literally, I'm just telling you right now, on a piece of paper, this thing I'm shaking right here, I have to always remind myself that there's a procedure for this. So I'm going to walk you through that procedure. So it doesn't matter how many times I do it, I still have to look at my hand for the right hand. But these are the settings you need. You're not transferring vertex positions, you're transferring vertex normals. So that needs to be on. You're not transferring UVs or UV sets or any of that stuff, no mirroring. You're just transferring vertex normals. So that's what we want. You must select the source. I'm going to look at this piece of paper that says select source, Ryan. And you select the source, and then you select the hair. Okay, select the source, then you select the hair. Control select. Let me be a little bit more clear there. And then you go into mesh, transfer attributes. Let it do its thing, and it'll tell you down here at the bottom, it says, hey, we're done. This is Mel's script for saying, hey, you've transferred the normals. That was set to 1. You're done. Now you can take this peach fuzz hair. I can now export that. And like I said before, I like to export those as an FBX. So mentorship fuzz. And having it out as a FBX is going to tell me everything that I kind of need to move forward from there. So hit the export button. And let's go into Marmoset. And let's load in the mentorship file that we built in day 9. No, there's nothing important to save there. Okay, cool. All right, now, let me see. This is real orange. I'm going to show you, before we get into the peach fuzz, I want to give you one really quick tip to make this skin even better. Because right now you might notice, there's a little orange hue to it. So I want to add some contrast in the hue itself. So I'm going to come into the subsurface scattering. I'm going to go to my texture, and I'm going to bring in the albedo texture. There's a lot you can do. There's a lot of variation. Now, there's a million things that can happen here. But just bringing the same albedo in and using that as a subsurface scatter has an amazing impact. It adds this extra contrast of warm and cool, and that's going to be the key to really a powerful presentation. So that's going to make a big difference. But that done and said, let's get ourselves in and import in our hair. We're going to come into the mentorship. We're going into the FBX, and the FBX is going to bring in its own material. So it's going to bring in a little Lambert, and you'll see it right up here. So we'll go right to that one and just make a couple of modifications to it. So we'll go color, and I'll go a little bit orange in the color, a little saturated. There you go. Not too much. And let's see what else we can do. One of the first things I like to do is I like to turn some transparency on. And I'm going to use dither and scroll down a little bit, and let's just see if we can get somewhere with just turning down that. Okay, and what we're trying to do, in my view, what you're trying to do with peach fuzz, you're trying to balance the fuzz you see here with the fuzz you see on the side. That's the balance, because peach fuzz isn't necessarily something we're worried about within the model. It's something that adds life on the sides. So again, in games, your trick, and not in games, in 3D, you're just trying to play the system to get you a powerful result. All right, and one of the first things that we need to be mindful of when we're establishing the look of something is what's the specular. You can see this specular is quite intense. If we were to take this up, and take this all the way down, the primary brightness that we're seeing on the sides is coming from the specular. Now, before we go in and we adjust this, just to see if it makes a difference, I like to go into subsurface scattering and see if adding some element of subsurface scattering kind of can absorb that and help reduce that to some extent. But in this particular case, no, it's not. We're not going to add fuzz to this because this is the fuzz. And so we need to do one of two things at this point. We need to start reducing the spec so that we're not getting as much of a hit. We want a little hit on the sides, but we don't want as much of a hit. We need to reduce the transparency so it's not getting so much on the face itself. Or we got to go back and we got to look in ZBrush and be like, well, look, that's just, maybe this is stubble. This is the perfect setting for stubble. We're going to have to come in here, back into the face, back into Fibermesh. We're going to go back into preview, and we're going to try this again. Okay, but this time, the only setting I'm really adjusting is coverage, because coverage is width. Coverage is the size of this. And I'm going to just set it to 1 and be like, I'm done with that. Let's just see if that works. And that's all we're doing right now is we're just experimenting. Okay, you got to go through the exact same process. Pause. Did we polygroup? Okay, go back. Do yourself a favor. Polygroup that stuff. Export. Make sure that was an export. And in my case, we will go mentorship. We're going to say fuzz, and we're going to say fuzz 2. Fuzz C1. All right. We'll let this thing export. Then we're going to come into Maya. And I'm going to just delete that. And I delete it because I don't need it hanging around in a Maya scene, you know, taking up a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of memory. I'm going to import, and I'll import the mentorship C1. There we go. And I'll do select the source, select the target. I'll go into mesh, transfer attributes, and my settings are already set, so I don't need to sweat that anymore. Wait until it gives me its little thing, a mel script down at the bottom. I'll come in and now export my selection. And we will call this mentorship fuzz C2 or C1. All right, again, all we did is we just changed the size, the thickness of the fiber itself. So we can come in and we don't need this piece anymore. So I'll select that and just exit that piece out. The Lambert is still there. The material is still there. So that might just replace itself quite nicely. And we need this one. Okay. Let's make sure that Lambert we can, well, let's leave it that way so I don't have to deal with the rename. Okay, select this, make sure it's applied, and right off the bat with the settings that we had there before, we are absolutely noticing a difference, or at least I am. Not getting all the crazy here, but I am getting some hit on the sides and down in these areas. That's kind of nice. And probably to really help present this, I'm going to actually come in and turn off the focus. So we don't want to really get in here and have too much of the, let's go into, where's my camera? All of these things just, come on, there you go. Let's turn our depth of field off. Okay, voila. So I can still see some of it on the sides. All right. That's looking kind of nice. Let's rotate this thing around. I see it here, but yeah, it kind of really dissipates. So I think that's the better option. We can come back in and increase our opacity a little bit. Let's take it all the way. Yeah, there you go. Let's take it down to about 0.5. Our specular, I don't think we actually need to go higher. I think we're in real good shape down there below 0.1, somewhere around 0.5. Might be just enough to lighten things up. We definitely have, well, that's too much, 0.2. I think is where we had it. You gotta wait until it registers. There you go. Just enough to liven it up. Right? And then the other thing you gotta remember is that when you come in and you actually render this stuff out, you know, and let's just do capture. Capture image and open. Gives you a slightly better version than what you're seeing here, although that actually is pretty crap. So we'd be either changing the lighting or we got to adjust the specularity to make sure that works. And I don't think, you know, subsurface scattering's not a big factor in this. It all comes down to our specular intensity. Just giving us a little bit of a hit in there. Nice. Now, the thinner something is, I might like to try to make this a little longer and see if we can get a little more in there. So that's what I would experiment with. I would render this out. I would go back to ZBrush and I would set my, let's go into Fibermesh and make sure we're selecting the top piece. And I'd go into Fibermesh, preview, and I'd set my length to 9 to see if that worked or gave me something different, and then bring that in and see. You know, and all it is this experiment is you start to learn what really works for your particular character. Don't take things for granted. Please don't treat this as this end-all be-all tutorial. I am in no position or of any interest in doing that. I'm a guide for you, and my goal is to give you options and stuff that I've learned along the way and give you tools to triangulate your own destiny, so to speak. That's my primary goal. It's always been my primary goal. So you've got some of the tools to help you move forward. Let's see if we actually are making a difference with this. Let's turn it off and then turn it back on. Yeah, I don't know. It's this tiny little thing. You see it here? It's like, yeah, it's pretty beautiful. I might go in and on top of that, let's turn the other peach fuzz off. Come into Fibermesh. And our coverage is 1. I'm going to set that length to 8, actually. And see what that does. And then I might increase my gravity to 0.5. Just to get that to fall a little bit more. And when it's falling a little bit more, you know, having the length go a little bit more is actually kind of a good idea. And then sometimes you need to take the density down. So maybe it doesn't need to be all 60 and whatnot. So let's accept this. And I'm going to do one more version. That does not matter to me. I am automatically selecting into that subtool. I'm going to poly group and just say group visible. And then we're going to export this. And we're going to say, this is just version 2. So let's go mentorship. We should just set versions. There you go. Let it do its business. Get ourselves over here, and I'm going to delete that as well. I don't need it anymore, and I definitely don't need it hanging around, taking up memory. So let's go mentorship, fuzz v2. We're going to import that. Select the source, control, shift, mesh, transfer attributes. Voila. Go into my group, export this, and we're going to export this as a FBX. Did I say V2? Should actually be V3. And that's me and my naming conventions. Okay, and we're going to keep this one around. The other one wasn't sold on. But this one, it's going to be a toss-up. Okay, apply just to be absolutely certain that that's there. And then just rotate this thing around. See if it works. It's kind of nice, but I think the length is a little much. Okay, the place and the way that this is going to work again is at the silhouette. So we might as well zoom in. Oops, come on. I'm getting some delay. Voila. Okay, so there versus there. Nominal. Yeah, it's that coverage really helped make up for the length. So I think we're pretty good with our original with the C2, not that last version we did. So just to simplify things, I'm going to remove that from our scene. Okay. Now, we're not done. We got one more thing to do to really round this out, and that's create the stubble. So we already actually are blessed to know the basic settings of the stubble because it was essentially what was there before. That thicker hair worked perfect. But let's go in. We're going to go into masking. And in this particular case, our mask is relatively simple. Avoid the eyes and there we go. Stubble goes quite high up, but there's usually a little drop there. It goes all the way down and comes out here a little bit in case you don't shave or in case you don't have stubble. And I'm going to about that. Did I lose some pressure sensitivity? Yeah, there. Okay, blur that. Okay, we're back. That'll work. For now, turn the view mask off. We come back into our Fibermesh. We preview this. And remember, max fiber is per area. So that's 50,000 within this area. Do your experiments. You know, it's not that we can figure this stuff out, but stubble's going to be not so much. It's going to be length of 5, maybe 3, something of that nature. I'm not going to adjust my segments or anything like that. I'm really just going to get in and adjust coverage. And if I remember right, coverage was set to 3. And what you have here in ZBrush is density. So that's really density kind of coming from the max fibers, right? So we don't want a beard, we want stubble. So let's try stubble at 25. Gravity is there. We can add some directional variant, which isn't going to make a ton of difference, but let's just put a little directional variant in there to kind of, you know, push things around a little bit. What would coverage of 5 look like? Coverage of 3. So the two things that are going to be relevant for the stubble for me, the two settings, I'm going to go back and forth between coverage and length. Because maybe I want the hair to be, I can use the length basically to make up for some width, or I want it to be short and fat. And somewhere in between there, it's really these 3 settings: fiber, length, coverage. Those all go in and kind of determine or help me kind of develop the effect of it, and the density, and, you know, all of that different stuff. You can also come in right here where the max fibers are. You can also come in and start to adjust these areas, and we can say modulate by masking. We can get a little tighter into there. You see how it starts to spread, right? As we get a little loose, we're like, well, screw it, ignore the mask, or at least, you know, do whatever. Or we can get really tight with the mask and say by mask area we go 5, and it gets even closer and it starts to really conform to those boundaries. But we can let loose a little bit. We start going below 1. So I'm in 0.5, 0.8. I kind of like 0.8. By area, what happens if we go 1? By area is largely taken into account the size of the polygon itself. So this one you got to be careful with in this case, because, you know, we're just trying to get a uniform distribution of hair. We're not trying to get it. I would use by area. If I want a lot of density in hair in some place, then I'll add lots of density in the geometry. So it's a nice way to kind of fake this. And then embed is going to push this directly into the model. I don't need to sweat that. I don't need to worry about that too terribly much. This is what my length profile is looking like, in case yours looks a little different. And that's what my width profile looks like. pretty straightforward. The scale root is set to 1 and the scale tip is set to 0.6. Those are different than the default settings, but we're ready to experiment. So I'm going to say accept this. Sure. And then I will rename this. I'll say stubble 1. And then why don't we get a couple of versions to try out here. So we can come into Fibermesh and we will set the length to 3 and I'll set the coverage to 5. Invert that so that they get a little thicker. And we'll keep the max fibers where it is and accept that and say yes. And then we'll come into this one and say stubble 2. Cool. All right, let's export stubble 2. Put the mentorship on there in the front so I know it's exactly this lecture. And we'll do the same here. All right, stubble 1 has the length, less of the coverage. We got to go into our hub application. So we're going to import them one at a time and export them. Let's do stubble 1 first. Did I miss a step? Uh-oh. While Maya is freaking out. Polygroup, group visible, polygroup, group visible. All right, and I'm going to just export those again. If I can. Which one? Stubble 2. All right, we're back. Let's get in and import those guys again. They were in E. So much easier, right? Source, and then we go from there. We're going to go into mesh, and let's just make sure that we've got our settings and transfer. Okay, all set. Export this as an OBJ, and this is just the deal, right? We're just coming through here. We're just doing our business. Mentorship, stubble 1. Delete it. Stubble 2. Cool. All right, we got our business ready. Let's move in and see what we can do here. We're going to keep our peach fuzz pretty much right as it is. We're going to come in and select the mentorship stubble 1. There you go. And let's make sure that that lamp, well, you know what, because we don't want the same opacity, I'm going to duplicate that. And then let's make sure that this one is applied. Okay, and in this one, we are not going to have the same opacity. There you go. Stubble 1. It's actually starting to look more like a beard, right? So let's import stubble 2, where we attempted to kind of deal with that. We're going to bring in the FBX. And turn, well, let's just apply the material first. And then we'll turn the other one off. There you go, that's actually looking better. Stubble. And now we're kind of done with these, so I can call it fuzz. All right. Now, between the two of these, which one do you like better? That's not quite stubble, that's beard. This is a little bit more stubble, I think. And with this, the next question and the real dilemma we've got is you know, can I get what I want by adjusting the opacity? You know, can I take it down so, yeah, that actually starts to become a little bit more stubble-like, right? But, excuse me, the other elements, the other ways that I would go about this now is I come back into this and we generate the stubble one more time. This time we come in and we're like, well, the max fibers, that actually works pretty well. But what about this, you know, this length? I mean, I don't really need a ton of length in there. But I do, and I am looking for this to be a little thicker. So maybe coming into this coverage and setting this to 8 and the length in here actually might be what we kind of want. So we'll try that out, you know, and see if that kind of works. Make absolutely certain, you know, your poly grouping and group visible. Yay. Export that. Mentorship stubble 3. Okay, in our hub application, same deal. We're going to import, and it's not touch sensitive in the same way. Where is my OBJ? Stubble 3. What was that all about? Good times. Source, target, mesh, transfer attribute. Da, da, da. Little game we play. Bring this thing into Marmoset. It's probably going to bring in a material, but so what? Let's go in and stubble. Where'd you go? Stubble 3. Okay, we can just delete that and apply our stubble. And then hide everything else. And then in this particular case, what does it look like when we increase the opacity? There. I'm not liking that fuzz. Let's turn that off and look here, just here. These could even be thicker, but this is pretty nice stubble, I think. This is not bad. Oh. Marmoset gets me with this all the time. I adjusted the fuzz, not the stubble. There you go. All right, so here is the stubble 2. Cool. And stubble the previous one. Yeah, you can see it's less thickness actually works. I'm going to lower the opacity of that right about there. I think that's pretty sweet. Take that down a little bit more. The thickness really worked. Okay, and let's turn our peach fuzz back on. It should be working now that I adjust the opacity back. And then get ourselves a decent view. Let me go into that peach fuzz and that intensity. The big thing that we're seeing here isn't the, it's that reflectivity. There you go. And then come into our stubble. All right. Now, as we go, you've seen it's just a game of getting in there and adjusting this more and more and more. And, you know, I'd be playing with these settings and I'd be playing with the width. And then the final thing that I would do to really help sell this, because, you know, if you rotate around in here, there's some issues. And specifically the issues I got, the things I'm not happy with, is the length of this inside the nose. On the sides over here, I'm kind of okay, and some of this I'm not okay with. But I love it over here, and I love it on the body back there. But I'm not digging it in the nose. Okay, nice. So the last thing that I want to share with you, and the last kind of key to this, to help you really craft this, is once you've got these created, there's actually more you can do with them. So if we come in and we select, I think this was our last element, we can actually just go bit by bit and see which one kind of works. Yeah, that last one, and then there we go. This one's this is the one that we're using right now. So you can come in to this, and just in the nose area with symmetry on, just press shift. Smooth all that out to reduce any problems in these areas. Like, people don't really have a ton of hair coming out of their nostrils, right? That's just not the way that works. So you can craft the appearance of this quite nicely, I think. Forehead's not, I mean, it's peach fuzz, but it's not, you know, a ton. So specifically what we're really worried about is just we get this nice plateau here in the nose, so it's going to be good to kind of tamp that down a bit. Most of the other parts of the face you're not observing in that same way. So, and then we're not going to get a ton of that peach fuzz here, you know, because this is stubble. So you can start to take some of that down as well, and then we can kind of gradiate that in there a little bit. There you go. But the rest of the body, you're going to get some element of this peach fuzz. You see, I'm removing it as much as possible from the areas where there's going to be the stubble. Now, we've got that done. We've massaged this. We've got some good quality on that. I'm going to just, because I'm kind of crazy like that, come into poly group. I'm going to say group visible. And then I'm going to export this. And I'm going to call this, I'm pretty sure this was Peach Fuzz 2. And so we'll just call this V3. Bring it into Maya or your hub application, Blender, Max. Any of these things don't matter to me. Only reason why I use Maya is because it was embedded in my genetic code. So I just learned it. And it's just muscle memory. It is absolutely in no way, shape, or form anything to do with features. So especially this. I mean, we're using features that've been around since I've been doing this, which is about 15 years. So we're going to export the selection and go into Fuzz V3. Come back into Marmoset. I'm going to turn Fuzz off and then import Fuzz. We want the FBX. Okay, make sure we apply fuzz to that. There you go. I don't know about you, but that looks a little better than having all this crazy scraggly stuff hanging around in his nostril, right? What you want to be paying attention to as I switch back and forth is, look at all that. That's like, okay, guy. All right. All right, let's go see an aesthetician about some of that. Here, all right, we can deal with this. I got your back. There we go. And it's just getting that little bit at the rim. All right. There you go, my friend. Go slow to go fast. That's been my key here. And the most important thing that's been driving me is I'm trying to go slow and thorough and slow your brain down. All right, I got a comment from somebody who was like, Ryan, you took an hour to do something that's 15 minutes. Teach a person to fish, you teach them to feed themselves for life. All right, I'm not interested in just giving you a fish. That's never been my interest. I want to teach you to fish as I'm learning to fish. And these are the things, these are the vectors, these are the ways that you can start to triangulate solutions for yourself. All right? Have fun. I look forward to hearing from you. I hope you learned something today. Make sure that you are getting in there and you are getting past that digital sculpt phase. Don't let yourself get stuck there. Take your model all the way. Get that texture done. Get the peach fuzz. Get the skin in there. Just do your best. It might look like absolute crap. And that's great. Because it's yours. Own it. It's yours. All right? You guys do not want to see how many different variations of you guys don't want to see the cutting room floor. It's not pretty. All right, but remember, you always see the back of your own house in a theater production. You don't see all the crap going on in other people's production. So be patient with yourself. All right, have fun. This is day 10 of the 12 days of realism. Where is my website? Head over to GameArtInstitute.com. That's me over there trying to remember, is it source? Is it target? Which one do you select first? Come on, Maya. God. Wish they had that control thing that we built in ZBrush. All right, head over to GameArtInstitute.com. This is where you can learn more about the other days. So the other 12 days are hanging out over here, and then also you can learn more about the courses. So you can come over here and learn about Christina's work and different students' work. Episode 37 with Eric Sosa of our podcast is done. And you can get into the rest of it all with the 12 Days of Realism. You can also learn more about courses and things like that we have going on. I got some mentorship going on, and we've got a couple of other cool things happening. All right, have fun. Have an amazing weekend. Happy holidays, depending on when you're watching this. Here's hoping you turn out something that you're proud of.